Welcome back to the show, everybody. I managed to catch one of the Curio Card co-founders onto the show. They're all a little bit in hiding, but I'm here with Travis Uhrig, as I said, the co-founder and the guy that you'd seen in the historical video of the Curio Card presentation down in San Francisco. So I'm excited for this. I tried looking for it again. I actually created a historical NFT YouTube channel, and YouTube just nuked it and deleted it for some reason. So I was trying to find it before this, but I couldn't. But I have you here instead, so I think that's a great trade-off, Travis. So thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Are you referring to I think the presentation was at Reddit headquarters, I think is where they did that. I didn't realize people have watched it still. The old videos that people find are pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a lot of context to the history. You know, there's words that you could say. We can interview all of the creators, but sometimes we need that third person perspective, whether it's through a camera lens that's set up to record something, or through some spectators that are there catching it, right? One famous third person capture at a conference, I think, is you during I think it's the Rare AF Festival, where you're questioning Matt. I don't know if it was Matt or John up there talking, and you mentioned that that Curio Cards had preceded CryptoPunks by a few months. Was that your voice?
Yeah, I didn't know that existed, that recording. That was another recent find. The perspective thing you mentioned is interesting too, because like the Reddit video, that clip, these are from the even a different me. You know, this is the perspective of me back then. I wasn't trying to bombshell the guy's presentation or anything. I had met them before and chatted, and they seemed really nice. They're really nice to me. In the thing, he asks the audience, because it's kind of the challenge of when you're saying you're the first project, there's no way to, it's really hard to prove that. Because there's the thing you don't know, right? So he said in like the presentation, "Hey, let me know if you know of a project that's old in the CryptoPunks." And so then I raised my hand during the Q&A part, and I said, "Well, you know, Curio Cards was a couple weeks earlier." I had mentioned that because, again, like this whole idea first wasn't really important back then. We were just doing stuff. It wasn't really a thing that people even talked about. He only really mentioned it towards the end of his presentation anyway. And yeah, so that's me on camera saying that, and him kind of reacting in the moment, because he recognized me from when we talked earlier, but I had mentioned that.
Yeah, it's truly an iconic moment, and that's been shared even just outside of Curio Cards, with the whole CryptoPunks claiming to be first, and proving that, you know, they knew about it, or maybe they'd forgot, or kind of fibbed a little bit of the truth. So that's a moment that
I like to err on the side they probably just, you know, forgot. It was a one-off in a conference. There were a lot of reasons why that first claim was brought down, and not just Curio. There are other people who have done NFT-like things that predate both of us. It's just sort of that where do you draw the line? What kind of NFT are you interested in? So I think they just wanted to get out of the business of trying to defend that line.
And I think that it's a business that is hard to defend, no matter if you're the absolute first, or you're the first in sort of a small niche. I tried to defend multiple projects over time, being in the NFT history space since the rediscovery of Mooncats, but being in crypto since 2016. And at some point I've come to realize that, yes, it's good to be very first, but there also needs to be some sort of cultural significance. And also within the token economy, you need to have a community that surrounds, right? You can stand on the hill and yell that you're the first, but if nobody likes you as the creator, or nobody supports a project or finds it interesting, then it's not going to increase in value from the social and financial capital perspectives than you would like to see. Where Curio Cards, yes, is a first art project. Who knows? There could be some sort of art project that pops up that's like some sort of hidden contract. But with 7 artists and 3 co-founders, the community that's formed around Curio Cards is quite strong.
Yeah, as they said, the hidden contracts too, right? And the impact. I feel pretty confident at this point that Curio is the first of its type of NFT because people have combed the smart contracts so thoroughly. I mean, there's a huge industry in it. There's a lot of money to finding the thing older, and people put a lot of time and effort into it. That doesn't mean there isn't that unverified Solidity contract on Etherscan that no one can read. But if no one can read it and no one ever can read it, it really comes down to the discoverability as well. The liquidity also, like you're mentioning, like the economics of it. If you have a really cool NFT project and, you were out, before Ethereum even existed, you were on the blockchain, on Ethereum blockchain, but there's only one of them and you have it, kind of like who cares is sort of what happens. It's historically interesting and it's a footnote and it's something we definitely would want to know about. But if there's no community of collectors, of people who actually own and are part of it, they went to the thing and they got the thing, they have the thing, that has a huge impact as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a guest that I had on who found a project called Beer Coin, which was created by Nick Johnson, who's the creator of ENS, but there's only like 60 of them. And he was only managed to get the person who I had on the show only managed to get one of them, and then Nick has other ones, and some of them are lost. And so at that point, if there's only 60 total, it becomes more of a novelty and a collector's item than there's like a liquidity pool where you can continue with the price action. So I know there's been some recent interest in even older projects. I saw, I'll pull the tweet up in a second. Brantley, one of the ENS guys, was talking about how there's like a secret society of uncovering these old token projects that no one even knows how to think about, and there's all this mystery behind it. Do you think most of these older projects that will just use Curio Cards as a point in time, do you think a lot of those that predate Curio Cards will be found, or do you think there will be more communities? Or if you look at the overall sector of historical NFTs on ETH, do you think we're pretty established where we are now, and then we kind of just need to move forward in whatever the next progression is?
My instinct is we've probably found what there is to find. This last NFT bull market was not a small thing. This was not this. It was, Jimmy Fallon's talking about it. It was huge, and there were a lot of companies founded and a lot of money involved. A lot of people made very rich, very, very fast, who had a huge financial incentive to find that older thing, and things were found that really shouldn't qualify. That kind of then got like the narrative changed about them. Like there was a project. I'm blanking on the name, but it was like a greeter contract. It was like your intro to Solidity contract, like the first thing you do, where you put like a sentence into a smart contract, and you put another sentence in. And so it's just like a bunch of sentences. And someone said, oh, if we like wrap the sentences as their own unique tokens and you can trade, it's an NFT project. And sure, you've turned it into an NFT, but the original contract was not an NFT. There was no intention of being an NFT. It did not behave like an NFT. There's no way to transfer the things. When you start seeing projects like that, I feel like we've probably hit the bottom of the barrel. That's not to say there isn't a lot of historical opportunity. The thing that really interests me is like the Lost Robbies, and like a fifth or so, maybe even more or less, of Curio's supply is in these things called zombie wallets. It's like the NFTs that we know about. We can look at them, we can point at them and say like, there's a huge stash of NFTs in this address. They're super rare, or it's never been claimed. And someone's going to find those keys one day. And watching those zombie wallets and seeing how that affects the market, I think is kind of where I'm interested in when looking at these old projects.
There is a project that's gone through some similar progressions a little farther ahead of Rare Pepes. And I've seen an interview where you said that you're kind of inspired by Rare Pepes for Curio Cards and you wanted to bring it to Ethereum. We saw this happen last year, where a wallet or an artist, because in Rare Pepes, the artist got the entire supply and had to distribute it. So you'd find one token, we'll just use an arbitrary number, 100 of these one Rare Pepes of a series. There was only 5 that existed outside of this creator wallet. And so then they started trading like, it's only out of 4, out of 5. And then the wallet wakes up and just completely obliterates that type of market. Yeah. Do you think is there a likelihood of this happening? Has you or the team been able to identify who those old owners may be and tried to reach in contact to kind of accelerate that process?
There's been a lot of outreach from me calling up everyone I can think of, as well as just people in the community doing a lot of research. If you go on, we actually, a website was just created by someone in the community recently, ccsupply.xyz, like Curio Cards Supply, CC Supply. And that's using a graph API that someone put together. And you can see on it the inactive wallets. So by inactive, or sometimes referred to as zombie wallets, these are for, listeners who don't know, like they bought Curio Cards in 2017 and then did nothing. They just sat there. And it's like the Satoshi Nakamoto problem in Bitcoin, where the early, the creator of Bitcoin, no one knows who they are, and they have a crap ton of Bitcoin that they've never touched, that's never been moved. They mined it and it just sat there. And like, are they dead? Are they alive? Do they still have the access to these keys? And if tomorrow a single 0.1 of a coin owned by one of these Satoshi wallets is traded, it would have massive impact on the price of Bitcoin. So people are like, oh my God, these coins exist. And people kind of assume they're burned right now. It's a ccsupply.xyz is the website.
.xyz, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know even with some of the rarer card, why is it not coming up? ccsupply.xyz. I know with some of these rarer cards, if you do have even, where is it down here? Like card 26. So you have 95 active and then 26 inactive. If those 26 become active, that's literally 25% more of an addition to it, which can just completely obliterate the price action. So solving that, it's pretty vital.
I think this visualization is really important for that, because if you're thinking about buying Curio Cards and you want to know what the risk of inactivity is, this is a great place to start, because you can see like some of them are extremely active, and red is burned. These are cards that we know they can't be touched ever again. And yellow are ones that people treat them economically as burned, like maybe they don't exist, like the market trades as if they don't exist. But as you say, they could show up at any time and have a huge impact. The Wizard, the Bard, the Barbarian are examples of, there's only like 45 of them that trade, but there's 500 total. And so like there's hundreds of cards that just people would just kind of assume that they're burned because they're wildly valuable and they've never moved. And the wallets that own them are super inactive. So if you're like concerned about that risk, you'd stay away from those cards. You'd go for the ones that are like all green.
Yeah, but then
those are much more healthy markets.
But then on the other end, you have the number one card, Apples, which is a very popular card where almost half of the supply is inactive. But but the market definitely trades it like it doesn't matter. Like the market's only pricing in 1,167 out of the 2154 that actually exist. So there are these like little discrepancies in the trading activity where people don't care, maybe just because Apples
I'd say it's consistent. It's consistent. They consistently don't care.
Yeah.
You look at any of these markets, and because like that green bar on Apples that is half full, it was worse when the product first came out. There were even more of them, and then 100 would drop. A wallet that hadn't been inactive would suddenly wake up, and that bar has been going down. I mean, it only go down, right? And every time that happened, there had an impact on the price. People trade as if the yellow cards are inaccessible. It's really kind of the only thing you can do when you're looking at a market with supply and demand. If it's not available supply, it like almost doesn't matter. If it becomes available supply, then you're going to see an impact on the price.
Yeah, it has a little bit different of a trajectory. When you think of the fungible markets and you have like a locked supply of XYZ coin, and the VCs who invested after 6 months, the tokens are unlocked. And so for those first 6 months, it trades like those tokens don't exist. And then once it gets closer, maybe a month or half a month or 2 months, then people start selling and preparing for what could be a dump. But then oftentimes that dump never comes. The collectors want to hold it because they don't want to either sell the low, or they just have a nostalgic tie to it because they've held on to it for so long.
or they lost access. The nice thing about this chart is if any activity happens, like if there's a wallet that owns 100 apples that's been inactive since 2017, and they don't like even sell, they just wake up, right? They wrap a card or something like that. Then it gets counted as active supply. Because people know, okay, I know that even though they're not selling it, they have the keys. Versus now, you don't know. It could be a lost wallet. It's really interesting if you look at some of these early wallets, and you can figure out the list pretty easily by looking at supply. You look at what they were doing. Well, Curio Cards came out right when ICOs were starting to explode. And that was sort of the thing. And this time around, it was NFTs were the big story, right? 2017 ICO was the 3-letter acronym that everyone was talking about on Jimmy Fallon, et cetera. It was the huge thing. And people thought Curio Cards was an ICO, even though it has zero ICO-like qualities. People were just buying anything they could find. So you'll see a wallet that's full of valueless, worthless ICO tokens, and then some really valuable Curio Cards. And they probably just threw the wallet away. They're like, there's nothing of value here. The ICO market went to zero. Nothing worked. I'm out. And now they may not even realize that they had Curio Cards in that wallet because they just remember that was my ICO wallet.
Right. It's kind of similar to what Satoshi said way back in the day, that every coin lost is a bonus to the holders because you've now increased the existing supply versus
like a dividend equally divided across everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a question that I wanted to ask where I'd listened to a bunch of your interviews and I hadn't been able to find the answer. So there's 7 artists of Curio Cards. There's 3 co-founders. Why didn't any of the co-founders or yourself specifically decide to submit some art into the first art collection on Ethereum at the time? Was there any specific reasoning or stipulations?
No, there's no reason, there's no rule. I can speak to my personal reason. My personal goal with Curio Cards was I started off in I should back up a little bit for context. I started off in crypto through the kind of open source Linux world. I didn't really come in through the collectibles economics world or the finance world. Back then, Bitcoin was more of a curiosity than a global talked about news story. You couldn't find it on Bloomberg or Forbes or anything. But I really loved open source software. I love the idea of public commons. You give your time and attention to something, and that's something that you kind of collectively own with everybody else. So I would do a lot of event organizing and volunteering. So I would do these Linux install fests where people bring their laptops, and I show them how to install Linux. And somebody there mentioned the Bitcoin Meetup group. So I would go and I'd volunteer at the Bitcoin Meetup group because I thought it was really cool, open source money. And I started organizing the SF Bitcoin group, and I also organized the San Francisco Ethereum group. And so that was my platform to have an impact on the community, was through this group. And there was one of the major narrative at the time for why isn't Bitcoin wildly popular is it was called the UI problem. You've been in this for a while. You probably remember this. The idea that the only reason why anyone's using Bitcoin, the number one barrier to adoption, is it's complicated and hard. And if we made it simple and easy, everyone would use Bitcoin. And we just solve that, we solve everything. And that's pretty compelling. So the idea was, well, how can we make Bitcoin more usable, interesting, et cetera? And at one of my events, this kind of it was really just going to a bar and drinking. But at the event, this artist came up, Crypto Graffiti, and he said, "Hey, I make crypto art," and I had never heard of that. It was art about Bitcoin, and that was real. I had a conversation, and it was really cool because if you look at any ecosystem, any kind of group of people doing anything, it's complicated. Everything's complicated. Sports are complicated. Everything has rules, right? Everything's complicated, but no one's really complains about it because there are people in that community really good at explaining it. They got songs and movies and just fun little pithy ways of saying things that work really, really well. So in my mind, Bitcoin needed artists. That's how you solve the UI problem. You get artists involved, you get writers, you get illustrators, you get any kind of creative person involved. So Curio Cards was kind of like an opportunity, and we did an art show like 2 years before, which kind of was starting that. It was the idea that here's how we can get artists involved in crypto who have never been involved in crypto before, and then they can make art and writings and poems and songs and whatever that explain crypto to people. So me being in Curio Cards would not have served that goal. I was already in Bitcoin. I was already at every event, standing up at front, introducing the speaker and answering questions at the end. Like there was no extra value with me entering the conversation. So I was trying to create a platform to get artists that had never done anything with crypto involved, as well as artists that were popular in crypto, to kind of help anchor and attract attention to it.
Off the top of your head, do you know a vague number of how many submissions you'd received for the 30 spots in terms of total art submissions and then the variation of artists?
I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that early on, we had less than we needed. Early on, it was hard to find artists. So 2 years before, we did an art show. It was a physical in-person art show in San Francisco, and we had 5 artists displaying their artwork. And we, of course, asked all of them, and all the ones interested in, did Curio Cards as well. But we were doing it on Ethereum for technical reasons, and a lot of them were pretty hardcore Bitcoin people. And it just wasn't their medium. They weren't digital artists. So we need to find digital artists who wanted to take a chance on this idea. And so it kind of was an open call. I go on podcasts and I'd be like, Bitcoin needs artists and Curio needs artists. Reach out. I had a Google form that Daniel, the artist for the pencil drawings, I think 24, 25, 26, he just filled out the Google form. I mean, you've interviewed him, you heard this story. It's a totally wild story. He has no idea where he saw the Google form, how he got the Google form. I asked him one time, like on a podcast, it was like a panel, and I said, like, why'd you do the form? He said, I like filling out forms. Like, that was his reason for doing it. And now he's a Christie's artist. He's a Sotheby's artist. And towards the end, we started getting a lot more attention from artists, and actually had to kind of do a contest to figure out who would be the artists going forward. But there just wasn't enough attention on the other side. We kind of solved the artist problem towards the end, like the last couple of cards, and they had plenty of artists. Actually, X Copy was one of the potential artists. He was like the next one in line. But we didn't have the other side of the equation. Nobody cared. No one was buying them. There was no users. There wasn't that attention. And it just sort of, the market wasn't there yet for it. So we solved the artist problem, but we didn't solve the user problem. And that problem solved itself. We just had to wait.
Right. Over time. So this then leads to like 2 interesting questions, but I'll start with the artist one first. So you mentioned that the X Copy was next, and X Copy has also verified this as well. And there could have been many other artists who would have been a great fit for Curio Cards and then later found success.
Pixel Pet. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Has there been any discussion of doing a second Curio Card drop, or is there more of an importance on keeping the original collection intact instead of following something similar we're starting seeing on Bitcoin with fake rares to rare Pepes, and now they have faux Sogs, which is for Spells of Genesis, and these like additional companion drops, which kind of bridges now the old kind of with the new and then the modernization.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a lot of conversation happened on it. So Curio's original intention was not to be an NFT project necessarily. Like, it wasn't your traditional 10K PFP where, we're making this as the collection and here you go. Curio's intention was to be more like art blocks or OpenSea. It was a marketplace platform. It was a tool where, Rhett Creighton, a co-founder, he created smart contracts because they didn't exist. And, I made a website and Tom was doing marketing, and we were just trying to essentially create a platform where if you're an artist and you want to put digital art on the blockchain, make it unique, rare, and collectible for the first time ever, come to us and we will launch your art. We will do all the technical stuff. We'll pay the gas. You don't have to have any Ethereum. You don't have to know anything about Ethereum. We'll walk you through it, explain it, et cetera. We were like a very white glove version of OpenSea was the idea. So that part, to relaunch that part doesn't really make a lot of sense, because that is a massive content moderation issue. That is a platform company, and we have OpenSea, we have Foundation, we have Rarible, we have Artblocks, we have Super Rare. Like this is a solved problem. We were doing it when no one else was doing it, and we're like, we need this. and, check, it's good. I look at the market, I'm like, this need has been solved. So I'm very pleased with that. To do more cards would be kind of like the idea of turning it into a NFT project instead and continue it. Well, then as an NFT project, its value is it's a historical project. Its value is this thing that ran in 2017 before anything else, had these artists and these cards, and it kind of has like a nice little completeness to it. That's not to say that someone couldn't carry it on. It's a public domain thing, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to like abuse you wouldn't want to say like we're Curio Cards, right? That's fraudulent, right? But as you said, like the faux SOG and the fake rares and things like that, where they make enough of a change and they keep going. Also, like the artists, there are 7 artists and they're all free agents to do whatever they want with the art, and they've done remixes. Robeck has sponsored artists to do remixes. Daniel's done remixes. Marisol Vangus, Max has done remixes. So there are actually cards past 30, newly created cards in the community. We're actually putting together a website to kind of showcase them all in one place, but you can also find them by just, going on OpenSea and typing in Curio remixes. And that's kind of where the conversation's gone in terms of new art.
That makes sense. I actually just had on, let's see, is it this one?
Yeah, so that was an artist that a friend of Robeck's. Robeck is one of the artists. He did the Bard. It's actually funny you picked the Bard because the Bard was based on me. Was the Bard card.
Really?
And so this is the Wizard is Matt, is Tom. The Barbarian is Rhett, and the Bard is me. Because I was just doing a lot of podcasts at the time, and I guess in Robeck's mind, I was the one singing the song of Curio. And Rhett was the muscle, making the Solidity contracts. And since Tom was, the famous person on the team, he was Mad Bitcoins, it was a big time YouTube channel, and he still does World Crypto Network, etc. He was like the magic, right? The marketing and the face as well. So that was where he got the idea from. I don't know if I have the definition exactly right for why he gave us each archetype, but he was doing a lot with archetypes at the time.
So then, here's remix number 1, as you could see.
So there's another version of me, Tom, and Rhett.
And then we have number 3. Yeah, it's interesting. So I just had on Rare Skrilla, who has kind of been the leader behind Fake Rares and is also one of the OG artists in Rare Pepes. And the founding of Fake Rares had a very similar beginning to Rare Pepes, where it's kind of started out as a joke in a telegram. But when he did Fake Rares, I definitely wanted to draw a distinction that, these aren't Rare Pepes, and that Pepe kind of transcends Rare Pepes and just being minted on the blockchain, because Rare Pepes, the idea of Rare Pepes actually started, I think, in like 2011 on Reddit or sometime around there. So they've had to set some like ideological distinctions, saying that they're separate collections, but part of an overall same kind of vision. Where here it's a little bit different, because instead of having Pepe as the foundation of the project, here it was about like innovation and experimentation, which has now helped these artists become larger than any of their expectations could have ever dreamed. So there's definitely a different route that you'd have to go to it, but keeping the historical significance intact is important, especially being at Christie's and Sotheby's, which is known for auctioning off historical artifacts.
Yeah. If you're, I think I like to think from the artist's perspective, but more often than the collector's perspective. So like if you're a comic book artist and you have the opportunity to do a Superman comic, like that's huge, even though it's not your original creation, to reinterpret, to have it, to take a stab at it. And some of like the best comics, these old golden age heroes have been kind of reinterpreted and re-seen. And that gives that artist some notoriety, some fame, and then you notice the things that they have created on their own. So I think the idea with the remix as well is, one of our 7 artists seeing an artist they really like and being like, hey, would you like to put your spin on what I created? as like a platform, and also to add to the cultural heritage of Curio, right? Because that new Superman comic is still as valuable, the Superman ecosystem, as the old one, right? It's continuing the story. That's why I like the Bard, how it changes in all of them as well, that story changing.
Yeah, there's
it's important that you don't try to pretend to be the original, because people are going to see through that, and it's not going to go over well, and it's just going to kind of hurt the system.
There's so many components of Curio Cards that kind of are glossed over, and one of them I'll talk about is a hot topic right now, which is royalties. Mm-hmm. As we see, royalties are kind of going back to how they originally started, which is at zero. Curio Cards, from what I've read and discussed, was implemented a 1% artist creator royalty. Might have been the first or around the first. I know Dada did a marketplace royalty, but that wasn't until like October of 2017. Whereas Curio Cards, as you mentioned, it was a marketplace, but it was also a collection. There wasn't really like a complete direction of it. Talk us through a little bit before we dive more into kind of what's happening now with royalties, how the idea and implementation of a 1% artist royalty came about within Curio Cards.
In terms of the 2017 Curio Cards, it was 100% in terms of the sales, because like, again, our goal was to get artists involved, and you start off as educational, and we did want to turn into a business if it was successful, because then it could fund and make a nicer website and keep going. But the intention was to feature artists. And we thought that the way that the thing would make money would be kind of on secondary services, you create an ecosystem, and then you have a marketplace, and there's a trading, et cetera. But just selling the artist's work, that's the artist's work. So we didn't, and Bitcoin's whole thing was like, hey, no credit card merchant fees. That was like the big, hey, merchants, add Bitcoin because of no fees. So if we then added a merchant fee, it just didn't make ideological sense as well. So when you bought a card from Curio, those first 2,000, it all went to the artist. You mentioned like how Rare Pepe's did it. The card be created and they give them all to the artist, and then the artist could sell them. We kind of wanted to show off some automation, and we wanted to make the artist's life a little bit easier. So instead of putting all the cards into the artist's wallet and then it's their problem, we put them into Red made something called a vending machine contract, which is sort of like the first mint function in a lot of ways. And the cards sat there, and then you buy from the cards from there, and then the artist can get the money once the card's sold out, which was actually an issue because they didn't sell out right away. But in the fullness of time, the money has all made its way to the artist as they've sold out. Going forward, though, so now it's 2021. People have found Curio Cards again. They really, really care about Curio Cards. They really want to trade them. They really want to use them. And Curio Cards is older than OpenSea. It's older than any NFT marketplace. It's older than maybe Uniswap existed. I don't know. I don't think it did.
I don't think it did either.
Yeah, but Uniswap didn't exist. MetaMask was like in beta. There wasn't even MetaMask. Well, we had to actually fork web wallets and stuff to get it to work. So there's no way to trade these things. The contract written, the token contract, is not compatible with any contemporary marketplace because they don't exist. There's no standard for it to follow. So the first major project we had to do as a community was the wrapper. And this was to take the Curio Card original token and put it inside a collectible sleeve, that that then works on OpenSea. So we're making this wrapper, and we realize once we make the wrapper and we go on OpenSea and we get the blue check mark, and you can now trade these cards. When you create a store in OpenSea, it asks you for a they call it a fee. They don't even call it a royalty. They call it a fee. You have to put something in. 0 is a decision. 1 is a decision. 10 is a decision. At the time, no one was doing royalties, really. It wasn't like a thing because it was all PFP projects. That was all like created by a group, and so all the money went to them. I guess in that case, it was all for the artists as well, right? Because it was their project. But we had this ensemble cast project where it's 7 different artists with different communities and followings and careers, etc. So we did a cardholder vote. It was actually kind of really cool. I think it's probably, I'm going to say first until somebody says from the audience otherwise, the first governance vote with NFTs, you vote with your NFT, you vote with your card. We set up a snapshot page, the same tools you use to vote on like DeFi projects and things. And based on the rarity of the cards you had and how many of them you had a certain voting power. And we put a proposal. It was like, 0% or like 1% or like 2%. There were like different options. And the one that I pushed for the most was keep it as simple as possible because there were a lot of competing narratives at the time. 1% seems like a nice, simple number. And then it goes to an artist-controlled multi-sig. So it's their money. They can do whatever they want with it. So in that case, 100% of the 1% goes to the artists entirely. And that's the proposal that won by an enormous landslide. It was like 98% of cardholders voted in that direction. So now anytime you trade an OpenSea, and we've applied this, even though we said just OpenSea in the vote, we kind of get that's what people meant. We've applied that same rule to every other marketplace that Curio Cards has been added to. 1% of all sales go to a multi-sig that I'm not in the multi-sig, it's just the artists, and they split it equally amongst themselves.
I think Curio, if I saw, it was about 50,000 overall ETH traded volume. So 1%, you're saying about 500 split 7 ways. So, it's still a significant amount of money. It's not anything like you're seeing Yuga Labs making $150 million in a year because they had 5% royalties. But now we're seeing this trend where the early projects, Curio Cards had a little bit of a different, but you saw like Mooncats and Larva Labs and Kitties and a few of these CryptoCats, some of these other ones where it was essentially free. There was no market fee for it. It was, we want 0% royalties because we want to encourage trading, and we want, especially back in 2017, you just want people on your marketplace. You just want people playing around, toying with it. So you had to give a lot of sacrifices for them to come around.
We paid the gas. I mean, we won no barriers of entry. And
now the royalties got outrageous. I know at some point in, I think it was like 2020, a super rare, which is the artist essentially NFT marketplace, installed like a 10% royalty for one of one arc or one of one work. And then the PFPs came out and it got so bloated that some of these PFP projects with 10,000 started charging 10% royalties. And now we're seeing things like SudoSwap or LooksRare came in and lowered the fee. Then it was X2Y2 lowered the fee. Now we have SudoSwap that's down to literally 0% royal artist royalties and a 0.5% platform fee. What are your perspectives on this? Because when you look at Curio Cards, it's 7 individual artists that you could say deserve, the super rare fee, but then also it's kind of taken this way similar to a collection type, like you see with PFPs or with Mooncats or some of these other ones. So you're kind of like in a catch-22 within Curio Cards. But what do you think is going to happen with the royalties? Is it eventually just going to go all back down to zero, kind of how it started? And what are your thoughts on it as being one of the pioneers in that space?
And the royalties that you were mentioning are like platform, right? So I think OpenSea takes 1.5%, I think.
2.5.
2.5, yeah, sorry, 2.5%. And then we're a percent on top of that. So the total fee is 3.5. But the vast majority of that goes to OpenSea. And that is something they can charge because of their popularity, their size, et cetera. Their essentially lack of competitors is where that figure comes from. As you get more and more competition, it's just going to chase that down, right? Till you have something like Uniswap, there's no fee, I believe, right? There's like a small fee that goes to the LPs, right? But that fee doesn't go to Uniswap is what I mean. That fee goes to the people providing liquidity, the people providing the thing. So I think these platforms are definitely going to trend that way. I don't think a platform like OpenSea is going to go that way because they're a business that is designed around the fee to fund them. And they're going to be able to reach markets that a Uniswap type thing is not going to be able to reach because they're very user-friendly. They can take credit cards, et cetera. But you're going to have those platforms. If you notice a tiny little bit about Ethereum, you're going to have that place you can go trade with no fee or a very small fee that goes to the people supplying liquidity, right? To make the thing work, the people putting cards and ETH into the pool or whatever. On the Curio Card side of the fee, since the fee is so low, there's not really a big cry to remove it. And in that regard, we only have control over that fee when it's being sold on platforms that have a fee feature. or respect like Manifold's royalty thing. So like Coinbase's NFT market, they use whatever you've set on Manifold royalty, which is like a on-chain royalty index. So there's that, there's OpenSea, there's Foundation, any place that kind of like lets us, if we control the contract, set a fee, and then we're just going to apply the 1% rule. Curio Cards is, though, also treated like a collection, as you said. People treat it as this larger thing, and there's a community around the artists. There's a Robeck community, and there's Daniel community, but there's also a Curio Cards community. And the Curio Cards community needs certain things. It needs, Discord. It needs Medium posts. It needs that supply graph that you showed earlier. It needs things that people need to do work for. So the way it currently funds those things, these things don't just happen for free, was early on, people just donated a bunch of money to kind of a common pool because, again, Curio Cards as a collection doesn't have a revenue source. Like that part doesn't have a revenue source. So people donated funds to the Curio DAO, and anybody has a chance to get those funds if they just show up and do work, and you're voted on by your peers. Like, I don't manage the distribution of those funds. We use Coordinate, which is another sort of DeFi governance tool. And, if you make a supply website and you're working with a couple of people for a couple months on it, you all kind of say like, hey, good work. And that gives you a portion of the distribution of that month. So that kind of like sort of self-manages itself. But eventually that, if it doesn't keep receiving donations as money goes out, like eventually that might go away. So there's always going to be, there might be a conversation, kind of is a conversation right now around, do we add, there's the fee for the artists, do you also have a fee for the community? And it'd be really hard to change that, is kind of my instinct. To do that cardholder vote to change the kind of purity of the artist royalty be extremely difficult. So I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone. I think, like, oh wow, Curio has a huge 10% fee now, all going to the DAO. Like, that's not going to happen. It's not impossible, because it is, at the end of the day, the cardholders are in charge. If they vote on it, it goes through. But I would even put another caveat on top of that. Even if the cardholders all voted on it, they may not have a right to that change, because unlike a PFP project where, hey, we created the art's the community, here you go. It's an ensemble project. It's 7 different artists with their own licensing, their own rules. I don't own any of that art. They do. Some of them have put out very permissive public licenses, and some of them haven't. So I think that like a proposal like that would still require artist approval, or new licensing being written around them protecting their intellectual property.
Right, because of the varying degrees. It's essentially 7 communities, or you could even say 10 communities with the 3 co-founders included, right? I know there's people who are fans of Travis, and so 11, right? And they're all different.
At the very least 8, right? At the bare minimum, there's the Curio, and then 1 for each artist. And then if you wanted to add in fans of other early people, then yeah.
Yeah, quite an interesting prospect, to say the least. So now. I've been talking about this kind of a lot within the historical NFT community. Now it's been a year and a half since the rediscovery craze that happened of all these projects, and now communities have formed. And I think over the next year or two, we're going to see a handful of these historical NFT communities kind of break away and show themselves as the leaders. But in order for that to happen, the overall community of historical NFTs has to grow. And so I kind of wonder, like, what is next for our community to increase awareness, exposure, obviously price, everything else, that's social awareness, everything that comes with it. Is there anything that comes to mind as Travis, the pioneer who grew the first art collection, or curated it from all these aspects that you're missing. I think you guys were like the first to use IPFS. So you had to solve the storage problem. You had to solve the marketplace problem, the artist problem. Is there any glaring issues within the historical NFT community that you see are issues or things that they need to attack in order to grow the overall pie for all of us?
Yeah, just to respond to you said there, yeah, Curio Cards, we were the first ones to use IPFS. We're the first persons to have to deal with a lot of this stuff, but that doesn't mean we'd have to deal with it now, right? Like, I don't need to find new artists every week. We would release a new artist every week. I don't have to do that right now. I don't have to figure out the storage problem anymore. There are a lot of IPFS nodes hosting Curio Cards. And even when Curio Cards was in the winter, the bear market, I had an IPFS node going. I kept the website going. Like there was a Discord. It was still accessible. Like that's a bare minimum amount of effort that was needed. There's still tech support available. And now these communities are discovered and big, and that's not going to be an issue anymore for them. They have very active Discord communities. They don't need to find new artists. They don't need to solve these technical problems again. The NFT market itself, I think, is doing really well in that there are these really great platforms now. If you're a new artist and you don't know anything about Solidity, you can launch your artwork, but it's still not super easy to do, to have like, to do something interesting, right? So like if you just want to make like an NFT, your image as a token, OpenSea's got a wizard for that. But if you want to have like your collection, have interesting features, like if you put these two NFTs together, it turns into that NFT, and then these ones together do this, and kind of that more interactivity in that game. You need to know some Solidity, or you need to find someone who knows Solidity. So it's not really answering your question about the historical part, but it is in a roundabout way in that I think that for historical, we just sort of, if the NFT market is popular, the historical market is popular. Because it's a part of what NFTs are. It's a part of that origin story. It's a part of that thing. And what a project can do, the best thing that they can do as historical is to just keep the lights on and be available for questions and do interviews and have an active community and support your community and treat the artists who were involved in the project really well and support each other and retweet each other, the different projects, and just make sure people know who you are and know what the real historical projects are and the not real historical projects, because there's always that sort of scam angle. I think in the long run, that kind of washes itself out because it's a lot easier for the real one to continue to prove it's real, whereas the scam one's just going to drop off. So just staying engaged with the art community and paying attention to what's happening in NFTs is probably going to do it.
Right. So survive, exist, and the historical community will grow as the overall pie grows. So the immediate issues is just NFT awareness.
Yeah, and take advantage of new opportunities. So I've heard people be very against the idea of fractionalizing art, for instance, right? Because that just wasn't a thing that existed when NFTs first came out. The idea you could take a big valuable NFT, put it in a contract, and break it up into lots of little pieces, tokens, and then people can have that. Be open to things like that, because that if you have an NFT where the floor is like $20,000, you're not going to get new people in as easily. But if someone can take one of those tokens and break it into $100 tokens, that's suddenly achievable. People can get involved in your community. So value those people as first-class citizens in your community. As we move to L2, like the gas fees aren't really a problem right now because it's like things are kind of down. But I mean, if it costs $50 to buy a Curio card, that's a barrier. But if on an L2 it costs like nothing, then that's good. So, but you have to do so. We have to actively make that sort of push into L2, and we haven't done it yet because the L2 market is still so new. But at a certain point, Curio, the community, or Curio, the idea, or some third party person is going to have to figure out how to make an L2 wrapper or something. So yeah, embrace those features that make NFTs easier to use and easier to get.
Yeah, we'll have to check out. Hopefully, Ponderware can provide that solution as they have their multi-staking projection contract called Jump Port, which is going to allow the NFTs to be projected into multiple L2s at one time. So it's cool that we have those kind of things that happen. But unfortunately, and this is in most historical communities, the price is, it's not as, we'll call it dynamic as some of the newer NFTs, right? It stays pretty level within an area because it has to go through the distribution problem. We still have to get the awareness problem, the attentive problem, right? There's a lot of kinks that still have to be worked out, and it doesn't follow those mass hype cycles because it's the mass hype cycles have already been gone, right? And so you have an underlying foundation of history. So yeah, just I think you're dead on of just sticking around and keeping the lights on. And I think if you had turned the lights off, right, we might not be in this situation. If you had dropped the IPFS node during that entire time,
right? If when people were rediscovering Curio cards, if they went on and they couldn't see the contract, they couldn't see the website, they couldn't see the art, they would have no idea what it was. And maybe now someone would care enough to try to figure that out, but at the time, certainly not. And even now, that's like, if the art's not there, the art's not there. Yeah.
True pioneer. And so then finally, before we do get out of here, what's the future for Travis? What have you been up to? Are you taking on any new projects within crypto? Have you gone to expand past crypto, and now you're just more of a curator for Curio, or an advocator? I don't hear much about what you do outside of it.
Most of my time is that community side of Curio. There's kind of the same message, that same mission of making it easy to use and continue to make it easy to use. So you go on like documentation, docs.curio.cards. There's a lot of documentation. This stuff doesn't just happen. There's a lot of like people in the background kind of working to kind of carry on and expand and explain and help, and what Curio is. And I'm involved in that. You asked earlier why I didn't submit art in Curio Cards. That's also something that I'm interested in doing. So I'm starting to kind of make the jump to the art world as well. I've always had a strong interest, obviously, in digital art. And I really like what NFTs do for, again, the perspective, right? You watch the news a lot of times, it's how NFTs affect collectors, and what are NFTs for collectors. It's from the perspective of the collector. And I kind of don't care about that as much. Collectors will have their own reasons to be there. They'll figure out that economics themselves. Because like you can collect in many mediums, but as a digital artist, you can't sell. Like that's where the new thing is with NFTs. That's where the innovation is. That's what makes NFTs special. If you're a digital artist before NFTs, your work had no value practically, because they're not unique. It's not special. It's a JPEG. So the power of NFTs to make digital art something that can be, supportive and you can grow and make just really amazing things really interests me. And especially also just interactivity that it allows. So I'm exploring that area as my next thing.
Ooh, you guys heard that alpha here first. I don't know if you said that publicly, but if you made it this far, then you know what to look out for in the future. So Travis, thank you for sharing your time with us. Truly visionary and pioneer in the space. Glad to hear that you're still helping keep the lights on, and maybe even build new lights so that Curio Cards can shine a little brighter. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.